Boy, do I have an exciting video for you today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Claire Fraise, and I am an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel sharing actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. And today, I'm interviewing Maxwell Alexander Drake, who is the king of practical and actionable writing tips. Drake is the author of Dynamic Story Creation, which is one of my favorite writing craft books of all time. I made a video about it a couple of weeks ago, breaking down the reasons why I liked it and why I just found it so life-changing and mind-blowing. So if you haven't watched that video, the link is in the description and also in the cards right here. But in this video, we talk about this book in depth and talk about all of the theory behind it, from why stories are important to why people write stories to how people connect to stories, and what are the secret things that every single story has to have in order to evoke that emotional connection to the readers that every writer wants to achieve. Every writer wants to write a book that readers can't put down, that they emotionally connect to, that they can't get enough of. And in this video, Drake tells you exactly how you do that and what little things you need to do and how you construct your story in order to make it a powerful story that readers simply can't get enough of. We are going to cover topics such as theme, major themes and minor themes, as well as the hero's journey and physical story creation, and how both major and minor themes impact your physical story events that you create and how those two things combine into creating an effective plot. We are also going to be talking about plotting versus pantsing and many, many other topics such as this. This video will be broken into two parts, so if you want to be notified when part 2 comes up, make sure to hit that notification bell and subscribe to my channel, because then you'll get a notification, you'll get to continue this video. So without further ado, let's welcome Drake to the channel. And please excuse my terrible lighting during this interview. I was experiencing some technical difficulties. Thank you so much for coming on the channel today. I'm so excited to chat with you and pick your brain about storytelling. Do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your books, and in particular Dynamic Story Creation, which is the book we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So I've been a professional writer for almost 20 years now. There's almost nothing I haven't done. I'm an award-winning novelist. I've sold dozens and dozens of short stories. I was the lead fiction writer for a massive game from Sony called EverQuest Next. I'm actually days away from signing a contract with another video game that I can't talk about at all, because it'll be like 3 years before they are done, and it's probably another year before they even announce the game. I've written comic books and graphic novels. I've written stage plays and musicals. I've written mostly adult fantasy, but I've written some sci-fi. I've written some children's. I've written movie scripts. I've got a movie script out right now that has actually sold twice. That's available on Amazon. Like I said, it's called Snurse, a Magical Fairy Tale. I've written TV. I would have, if it wasn't for cancer, I would have had a TV show drop this year, an animated cartoon. Hopefully it'll drop next year. And then, yes, I have the Drake U website. It's just my name with the letter U for online videos and training. And then I've got the creative writing book, which is how you found me. The first 2 are out. I'm actually writing a third one now that I'm hoping to get out by February, because I've got a big writers conference in February that I'd really love to take a new book to. It's called The Holy Book of Grammar. Super excited about it. Yes, it is a grammar book. Yes, it teaches grammar, which is horribly dry and terrible, but I'm a really funny, engaging writer. Right. And I think that's the reason why you like my book and everyone else likes how I teach, is because I'm a why guy. So when, I was coming up through the ranks and I'm learning, and people would say, like, I remember I was one of the very first writers group that I ever read at, probably 25 years ago. I read, and somebody, when they were critiquing me, they were like, man, you use a lot of was's. You should use no was's in your writing, because they're always passive voice. You want to write an active voice. Now, I had never heard the term passive voice or active voice 25, 30 years ago. And so I was just like, oh, thank you. Passive voice. What the crap is that? And then I did some research, and he was wrong. Was's are not always passive voice, but they are. It's definitely a red flag. But once I learned something, I'm not satisfied of, oh, you should use passive or active voice. I'm like, okay, why? Why do I need to use passive voice? What does it do for me? What does it do for the story? What does it do for the reader? And then after that, it's like, okay, how can I push it to 11? How can I really use passive voice? Not just use it, but just drain it for everything it's worth. How can I bend it? How can I break it? So this is what I've been learning my whole life. I mean, that's it. I've done everything. I've worked on everything.
Yeah. So for today, I'd really love to talk about dynamic story creation. For those of you who don't know, on this channel, I did a video on this, a video about this book a couple of weeks ago, and how it's just totally changed the way that I've thought about storytelling. And I'd really love to just talk about the theory behind story, because it's very unique the way that you talk about things in this book, and it really resonated with me. So I struggled when writing out the questions to figure out how to structure all of the questions to go in an order that like makes sense. So we don't jump into the, invisible layer too early before we talk about the physical layer, and just kind of, I know you teach this stuff all the time. So I know you typically have an order of ways that we talk about it. And we don't have to do a full like lesson or anything today, but just give people a little bit of a taste for the theory, coming from your point of view instead of me trying to echo what I heard in the book.
Yep.
So I was thinking that maybe we could start by you talking about like the why of story, and like why stories are written, and what are they supposed to do, and what effect they're supposed to create in the reader, and then move on to more of the structure of the physical layer, and then the major theme, and then go from there.
Yeah. Like where I start is always with what I consider my job to be. And, I always say this doesn't necessarily mean what you want to do as a writer, and that's fine. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
But me as a writer, and it's one of the reasons why I really hate the world that has become in the last couple of years. And I'll get into that in a second. Not to get political, has nothing to do with politics. It just has to do with other things, which I'll explain. So for me, my job as a writer is to take my readers from the comfort of wherever they're at, and put them into very uncomfortable situations and drag them through the mud, so that hopefully at the end of my story, they become better human beings. That's what I feel. And that's one of the reasons why I love writing epic fantasy so much, because of the fact that it unshackles you from whatever. So like in my first award-winning novel, I deal with a lot of slave mentality, a lot of slave stuff. And nobody's ever said, well, I mean, you're a white boy, what do you know about slavery? And because then my answer would be, well, it's a lion dude. What do you know about lion dudes? Like, that's the beautiful thing about dipping into that fantasy, is because you can deal with these really hard, uncomfortable human things and unshackle yourself from our world. And so the reason why I don't like where we've gone in the last couple of years is as a story creator, I write for humanity, period. I don't care I don't care if you're, a man or a woman, white or black, gay or straight, Republican, Democrat. If I write a heartbreaking story about what it feels like to bury your 3-year-old child, you don't even have to have children. I'm going to impact you, and I'm going to put you in a horrible situation that you're going to have to face that demon. And because you're human, unless you're a psychopath, you're going to come out the other side affected by that journey, because I'm going to force you to be. And so all of this superficial crap that the world is so focused on these days, I'm not, because, and I am not political, and I am not religious, and I am not any of those things. I rarely leave my house. So you guys live in a world that I don't live in. So I'm definitely not talking about that. But from my world and what I do, all this superficial crap is just that to me. It's superficial because I tell stories for humanity. And so I've got fans that are every age, from 9 to 90. I've got every race, I've got every gender, I've got every sexuality, and they all are impacted in the same ways by the same stories. And it doesn't matter what they are. They were, I put them in a situation, I make them feel this horrible humanity or human kind of experience. And then they have to face that and contemplate what it would be like to be in that. And they come out the other side going, wow, all right, I didn't think about things like that. And that's just, that's the way I've always lived my life. One of the things I always say is, a lot of people think imagination is the number one skill you need as a writer. And I think that's bullcrap. I think imagination may be at best the third most important thing. The most important thing, in my opinion, that a writer needs is empathy. If you can't become someone else, I don't think you can be a good writer. That's why it pisses me off when, this new trend of, oh, if you're not black, you can't write a black character. Oh, if you're not gay, you can't write a gay character. Really? Because I've written everything. Matter of fact, I write romance under a female name that I'm never going to tell you what it is, so don't ask. As a female author, writing female main characters, and nobody has a clue that it's a dude writing that, And it's not because of any other reason, then I can become a woman. I can literally empathize with what it means to be that. And, you know, a lot of people today will be like, oh, no, you can't because it's a lived experience. Yeah, it's called empathy. I can literally put myself and imagine, because I've also been a dragon. I've also been a lion dude. Like, I can do it. That's what's called imagination. It's, you know, you can imagine what it's like to have to go through that.
Right.
You know, I've never lost a child. I have 2 children of my own, but I've never lost a child. But I guarantee you, I will break your heart if I ever wrote this. I can't. I would break my heart writing that story. That's what I believe the job of the writer is. And then if you buy into that, what you learn is there's only one thing that makes a story, and that's the human element. That's what I call the invisible element. And everybody's heard the term, it's your theme, but nobody really understands what that means. You know, and it's one of the reasons why I hate academia so much, because if you spend $300,000 and spend 6 years in creative writing, you know, getting your MFA in creative writing, this is what they're going to do. They're going to say, hey, you have to have a theme or you don't have a story, which I 100% agree with. And then they're going to say, you can never mention your theme, which I 100% agree with. And then they say, good luck, which I don't agree with. Like, and that's what dynamic story creation is there to fill the gap. It's there to say, look, yes, you have to have a theme or you don't have a story. Yes, you can never mention your theme. And here's how all that works. Here's how you find it. Here's how you use it. Here's why it's so important. Here's what makes a story, because the only way to impact the reader is through that. It's also the only thing people walk away with.
Yeah.
If you think about, you know, your favorite book from, you know, 10 years ago, or your favorite movie from 10 years ago, you probably don't remember the details. You probably don't remember everything the character did or, you know, everything like that, but you do remember that you loved it. And the reason is because the theme, the human element, affected you in a positive way that made you go, oh yeah. And if you don't do that, then you, like, the two movies I love to pick on, because they're the exact same movie, are Jurassic Park and Transformers. The same movie. They're big things killing humans. But if you've seen Transformers, you're not going to watch it a second time. I know very few people that actually watch Transformers twice, because once you've watched it once, you're done. It never made you feel anything. Like, I'll even ask my audience when I'm teaching this, I'll be like, does anybody remember that's, you know, Shia LaBeouf's character's name? Do you remember any of Shia LaBeouf's character's background? Do you remember what Shia LaBeouf's character actually did? And everybody's like, now that you mention it, no, I do not. I don't remember anything about that character. Right, because Michael Bay is a horrible writer. I'm just going to say it. He's way richer than me. He can take it. And I've given him all my money. I see every Michael Bay movie. They're great, but video is a different medium. You can blow stuff up and not have a message and still entertain people. You can't blow stuff up in a novel. It's just words. So if you don't move the reader in some other way, you're never going to do that. But then you flip around. I mean, if I'm flipping through the channels and I hit Jurassic Park and it's halfway through the movie, I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to watch this for a few minutes. And I'll probably end up watching it for the rest of the movie, because Michael Crichton was a fantastic writer. He understood how to connect readers to characters. He understood the thematic elements and how to move us from a human standpoint. And so, like, when, you know, if you've seen Jurassic Park and we mention it, most people are like, oh wow, that was really, I haven't seen that in years. That was a really good movie, wasn't it? But you don't remember any of the details about it. You might not even remember the characters' names, just like you don't remember Shia LaBeouf's character, but you do remember what they did. You do remember what you felt like when the big tubby dude who caused all the problems and stole everything, when he gets killed, you remember that you felt good. Like, you felt really good about that guy's death. Which there's two things. First of all, that guy has a mom, so you're a horrible person for being happy that he's dead. But two, why? Why did you feel happy he was dead? Because Michael Crichton is a great writer, and he connected you to the story and to the character, and you knew that that character deserved what he got, and you were happy to see him get it. Like, Shia LaBeouf, did he die? Did he not die? Like, what did he do? Did he overcome? You don't know, you don't remember, you don't care, because you were never connected to it. And so that's really what it all boils down to me. If you don't understand structure, if you don't understand that invisible layer, if you don't understand what you're actually doing as a storyteller, then you're just writing events. You're writing your character, and you're like, oh, my cool character, and oh, my cool world, and oh, my cool blowing up the Death Star. None of that matters. It matters, yes, in the fact that it has to be cool and it has to engage the audience and all that. I'm not belittling it, but without the underlying layer, without what I call that invisible layer, all of it's worthless. And
Right.
this has probably happened to most people, because it's happened to me. It's happened to most people that I know, where you'll read a novel and the book isn't offensive. You know, the writing is not terrible. It's not 50 Shades of Grey, which is a literary portion. The characters seem like they're kind of cool. The world seems cool. They blow up a Death Star at the end, and that's kind of cool. And yet you go, but I probably will never read anything this writer ever wrote again. I mean, because there's nothing wrong with it, but it didn't do anything for me. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just not. No, it's not you. It's the writer. They're a crappy writer. They have no idea. They're writing this physical layer. They're writing the characters and getting the magic sword and fighting the dragon and all that. But they're not. They're Michael Baying it. I verbed Michael Bay's name. Yes, they're Michael Baying it. And again, that works in the visual mediums, but it does not work in written mediums. And so I think that's the reason why everyone loves dynamic story creation so much, because the first time they've ever been slapped in the face with this is really what your job is, and this is really what you have to think about. And if you aren't thinking about this stuff, you're never going to be successful. Sure, maybe you find a fan base, because the thing is everything's subjective. So I mean, 50 Shades of Grey has a huge fan base. Yeah. It's awful in every way, but it still has a fan base. Mm-hmm. And it deserves a fan base because it's erotica, and erotica actually has to hit different points than other things. Mm-hmm. And I say this all because I'm invited to speak to a lot of romance conventions, not as my romance name, literally just as my fantasy name, because they don't even know who my female author name stuff. My wife doesn't even know that name, so she gets the money and that's it. But it's something that I've just kept a secret. I did it in the beginning, and now it's just kind of like a game for me. I'm just like, nope, I'm never going to tell anybody. But I'll say the one thing about romance is you're lucky. Romance are the least critical fans that exist in the market. Mm-hmm. As long as you get them what they're looking for, and there's different genres of romance, so it depends on what you're doing. But as long as you give them that feeling, like erotica, as long as you give them that gushy feeling inside, they don't care how poor your writing is. They don't care how terrible your characters are or how stupid your plot is. Did you give them the gushy feeling inside? Yes, great, I love you. Because that's what they're looking for. Right. But I write epic fantasy. You miss a comma in one chapter and they will crucify you. They are the most nitpicky fans that exist in the world. Mm-hmm. And so you can't write like that. And also, even if you don't, move them, if you don't connect with the characters, you don't do all that stuff, you will literally, they'll stone you. They're a brutal, brutal fan base. Mm-hmm. So, knowing this, I push myself to this level and make sure that I deliver what I'm supposed to be delivering. But it really does come down to understanding that invisible layer. Mm-hmm.
So in a lot of other craft books I've read, theme typically is described in pretty vague terms. They'll say it's coming of age or it's love. They're very broad themes, but in dynamic story creation, you say that they're very specific and you have a different definition for what a theme is. So could you talk about what you think a theme is?
Yeah. A theme is the human element that transcends everything else, all the superficial crap. It transcends race, sex, sexual orientation, religion, all of that. So the loss of a child is a theme dealing with that. The loss of a parent, greed, the 7 deadly sins. Hating mustard is not a theme. Mm-hmm. Now, I hate mustard and I don't have any mustard in my house. And if I invite you to a barbecue and you bring mustard over, I don't let you into my house. You just can't come in because mustard is of the devil and I don't want it in my house. But that's not a theme. That's a personal preference, probably a prejudice because I hate mustard. But that's not going to move anybody. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how many themes there are. New themes are created as humanity moves on. The theme that Jurassic Park runs is, should science be allowed to grow unchecked? Because should we really resurrect Tyrannosaurus Rex? That's kind of the whole thing about the thematic element. But in the 70s and 80s, society was really kind of struggling with that.
Mhm.
But when Beowulf was written 7,000 years ago, humanity wasn't struggling with, should we clone dinosaurs? It's
Right.
not a theme that they were even concerned about.
Mhm.
Maybe they were like, should we actually use fire, on an arrow when we shoot at another ship? Maybe that's a story. Probably not, because they were horrible people and they would do anything to kill anybody. But so, as society does change, we do pick up new thematic elements that
Mhm.
mean stuff. Some other thematic elements fall apart, they drift away. So I don't think there's a finite list, but there is a finite number at any given time. And so if
So
you
when
can,
you're posing a theme for a story, you want to pose it as a question. You don't want to just say, oh, the theme of the story is love. You have to find a specific question that examines that theme, like the one in Jurassic Park.
actually, I take it one step deeper, because that doesn't help me, but you're right. Normally when they teach it as a question.
Yeah.
So like one of the movies that I love because it's so brilliantly written is Finding Nemo. And Finding Nemo actually has two stories. Technically has three. A lot of people don't realize that it has an entire story in the first 90 seconds, an entire hero's journey story from start to finish. Most of it happens off screen, but without it, the movie doesn't work. And I don't want to get into that because it's so, I get giddy like talking about this because it's so brilliantly written. But really, for the main thrust of the story, you have the Nemo story arc and you have the Marlin story arc. And Nemo's story arc is coming of age, so it's what to do when you're relying on yourself for the first time. You don't have any parents. I'm not going to go into that because I'm an adult. So the Marlin story is the one that impacts me the most, and the one I usually talk to because I'm usually teaching adults. And so the theme, as a question, is what type of parent should you be? Should you be overprotective, or should you allow your child to, take risks and just kind of be there to make sure they don't die while they're taking these risks? And that's what it's going to play with, since that's the question that poses to the reader. And so you're right. When you're writing a theme for your audience, what you're doing is you're giving them a question that they're going to have to contemplate. The crazy thing about it is the question that they contemplate may not be the question you thought they were going to contemplate, which is fine. This isn't a bad thing. It's just the beauty of interpretation. So the one I always like to use with that is the Pied Piper. Everybody knows the Pied Piper story. There's a village that's overrun by rats. A dude comes in with a magical flute, and he's like, I can get rid of all your rats. They say, great, we'll pay you money if you do it. He plays his magic flute, takes the rats down to the ocean. They drowned. He comes back. He says, give me my money. They say, yeah, no, you're some weird guy with a flute. No. And so he goes, that's fine. And he plays his magic flute. He takes all their kids down to the ocean and he drowns them. Now that's the real version, not the watered down American version where the kids don't die. So, some people, a lot of people, when they're done, they're like, oh, it's obviously about greed. It's about not being greedy. Okay, I can see that, but that's not what it does for me. The question for me that it poses is, should you honor your commitments? That's the theme that I get out of it when I walk away. Does it hurt the story if you think it's about greed? Does it hurt the story if I think it's about honoring your promises? No. They both still are thematic elements. Everybody understands greed. Everybody understands making a promise and breaking it. Both those transcend everything. So that's the other thing that you got to kind of understand, is just because you think you're writing a story that has this question may not be. For some of them, I don't think there's any way to miss it with Finding Nemo, with the Marlin arc. I mean, it literally is, the fact that he's an overprotective parent, which causes everything. He has to go through the whole time the story saying, hey, don't be an overprotective parent. And at the end, he has to make that decision of, I can stay an overprotective parent, but then Dory dies, or I can trust my child because he's learned a little bit, and I do need to let go a little bit because of all these lessons that I've learned, and I can save Dory. So we know that that's the theme because it's right there in our face. But it doesn't necessarily, like sometimes themes can be vague because, again, you can't ever mention them. So if you can't mention it specifically, then it really comes down to crafting scenes that allows the reader to consume it without ever being told that they're consuming. That's why I call it the invisible layer. It's why I say you're fulfilling the unknown expectations of the readers. And so that's really, to me, what a theme is. It's just figuring out what is the message that transcends everything, that hits humanity. I always say the only requirement that somebody needs to know to have to consume your theme should be that they were born human.
Yeah.
Period. If you can say, yes, anyone born human will be affected by this, then you have a theme.
Do you recommend when you're sitting down to write, starting with a question or writing the story and then figuring out what question fits the story best and then going and rewriting the story to better fit the question?
So to me, there's only two ways to find a theme.
Mhm.
One is to start off with it.
Yeah.
I am not smart enough to do that. I have never done that. I have no idea how you would do that, how you go, I'm going to write a story about, I mean, I guess, so like my example, of maybe you lost a child or you have a friend that lost a child or whatever, and you want to explore that pain and that, the growth of that. Okay, great. I'm starting with the fact that I'm going to be dealing with human tragedy of losing a child. I know my theme, I'm going into it. Golding in Lord of the Flies, he knew that he was going to play with the fact that all humans are born evil. That's what he's going to play with. That's what he's going to prove. That's what he's going to do in his book. I've never done that. I've never, because I don't write that type of stuff. I write very big epic things. And so I usually get the idea for the world or the epicness. Like I'll get the, you know what if there was a laser rifle that was as big as a moon that we'll call it, I don't know, a Death Star. And the evil empire has it and my character's going to have to destroy it. Like that's what I'll come up with. And then I'll start working on, everything from there. Yeah. So I've never done that. So the other way is you have to discover it. You figured out your story or you figure out some ideas and you start posting some stuff together. And then you have to, and that really comes down to what type of writer you are.
Right.
There's only two types of writers. There is discovery writers and there are plotters. And you are one or the other. And you can't be what you're not. So I'm a hardcore plotter. I'm like this, we were just talking about this before we start recording. I'm working on a 20 novel thing that I plotted out for almost 2 years. There is an entire wiki written on it. There is hundreds of thousands of words and, all this crazy stuff before we wrote a single word. So normally, like for my novels, I will literally have every single scene broken down with a chapter breakdown sheet, which is about 800 to 1,000 words long of everything that's going to happen in that scene. Everything, not just the synopsis, but all of the beats of it, the reversals, the turn. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. So the reversals, the turn, the what's the emotions of it? What is the motivation? What are the reader questions that they're going to have when they come out of it? What am I going to answer for them? It's a massive, intense, all my not only my major theme, but all my minor themes I'm going to play with in the scene. It is very intense that I plot this stuff out. So it's usually between 40 and 50,000 words per novel. And my novels can range anywhere from 150 to 180,000 words. So I'm writing about 1 word in prep for every 4 words I'm going to write when I start writing the actual novel. But I am a plotter because I cannot write unless I know everything. If I can't look at a blank page and go, okay, so the character is going to kill the bad guy here. Let's do it. I don't even know where to go. I don't even know where to start. So I have to have that. So I'm a plotter.
Yeah.
However, if you're a pantser, you can't do that because a pantser is what I call them. They're called discovery writers. I like to, since I'm not one, I like to be derogatory.
I call them pantsers on the channel too. It's
well, you're just writing by the seat of your pants. So a pantser, if they plotted everything out, a matter of fact, there was a girl in my class last night that tries to be a plotter because of her mentality. She says she's very OCD, but she has never finished a story, and it's because she's a pantser. Once a pantser figures out the end of the story, they don't want to write it. They're bored. So you can't be a plotter. Like you just can't. And so that's really for the thematic element. That's what it comes down to.
You have a pretty grim diagnosis of being a pantser, though, and dynamic story creation. Don't you say that in order to actually write good books, if you're a pantser, your skill level has to be incredibly high. Otherwise, all of your books are going to be trash.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's funny because plotters were frowned upon for 200 years of the publishing industry. Back in the day, everyone was a pantser, every single author. And if you plotted anything, you were, matter of fact, Stephen King said this in his On Writing book. He said, if you're a plotter, you're not a real writer. My answer to that is, except for you'll never see the ending of my books coming ever. And there's not been one single Stephen King thing, except for The Shawshank Redemption, that is actually his one true masterpiece. Everything else that I've ever read from Stephen King, I've gotten about a third of the way through and I've gone, I wonder if the book is going to end this way. And then it ended that way. And it's because that's when he figured out how it was going to end. And I'm just as sharp as him when it comes to story structure and everything else. So I figured it out about that same time. And so now I know where he's going, because this is where I would go if I was just pantsing it. And so when I get to the end, I'm like, yep, exactly what I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides. And I do try to go into those. But I try not to be nice to plotters either, because there's some serious negative things that plotters have to deal with if you don't pay attention to, that'll ruin your book. But yeah, with a pantser, you're not going to get a lot of subplots. You're not going to get a lot of twists. You're not going to get a lot of, you know, endings that are going to be just come out of nowhere that still fit, are still like, it's sort of like that Sixth Sense. Sixth Sense was not pantsed. Like, he plotted that out and made sure that everything was there, so that when you got to the end, you not only didn't see it coming, but you also didn't feel cheated. You're like, I should have been smart enough. Like, every clue was there. But you can't pants that. Yep. That is not something, you cannot pants something, you know, that complex. And everything I write is complex. And so, you know, I take advantage of that. So yeah, so with a pantser, you've seriously got to understand the structure. You seriously got to understand your beats. You seriously got to understand when to hit the inciting incident, when to hit the mid-act 2 climax, what a mid-act 2 climax is, which most people don't even know. What your rise and tension is through all 4 parts of your 3-act play. And there are 4 parts to a 3-act play, not 3, because there's actually a first half of Act 2 and a second half of Act 2. They're very, very different. You have to really know this stuff so you can write it kind of on the fly. So if you're a weak writer, if you don't have the skill, if you haven't spent 10 years studying this stuff, yeah, I'm going to run circles around you even as a starting out plotter, because I can make those mistakes when I'm plotting and fix them without having to write this crap. And so as a pantser, you have to do it. But getting back to your question, because that's really where it comes down to. Most of the time, you're not going to walk into a story knowing what your theme is. You're going to know other things. And so the 2 different ways is a pantser is going to discover their theme as they're writing. So the big thing is that most pantsers don't even look for actually most writers don't even look for their theme. So you've got to constantly be aware of it. You got to constantly be looking out for it. And as a pantser, you're just going to start writing chapters and you start, you know, meandering through, and eventually you find the story. And if you're a professional, you will then cut everything you've written up to that point, because that's when you found your story.
Yep.
A lot of indie writers don't do that. They're like, no, my mom loves all this stuff. I'm going to keep it in. It's all garbage. Like, it's not a story. Like, you didn't have a theme. You didn't know where you're going. You got to cut it. That's actually, so I've been on a crusade for the last probably 4 or 5 years when I go to a writers conference or I go to visit writers groups or whatever around the globe. And the term will come up, killing your darlings. Most people don't understand what that is. They think, because of George Martin, they think it means killing characters. It has not anything to do with characters at all. It has to do with cutting scenes that you've written, because it's hard. It's hard to cut a scene that you've written. That's your darling. And so if it doesn't push your theme, and you're a discovery writer and you now have figured out what your theme is, you have to now look at every scene that you've written, and you have to make one of 3 decisions. 1, okay, yes, it definitely moves my theme. Great. 2, it doesn't move my theme, but the chapter's important, and I can figure out a way to get it to move my theme and do what it's doing. Or 3, you have to cut it because it doesn't do anything. And maybe there's something important, like maybe Bob dies in this chapter and you have to have Bob die. Okay, great. Then put that in a different chapter. Right. Like, if the whole chapter doesn't do anything but kill Bob, but it doesn't move your theme and it doesn't do anything and you can't get it to move your theme, then you have to cut that scene.
So by moving your theme, I know that you're supposed to have 2 opposing answers to your major thematic questions. So in Finding Nemo, you have the question, is it better to be an overprotective parent, or is it better to let your kids self-actualize and step in to make sure they don't die? You have answer A, which is it's better to be overprotective, and answer B, which is it's better to be pretty hands-off. So then I remember you talking about in the book how you want to have scenes that provide opposing answers to the question. So you have some scenes that say, actually, it's better to be overprotective, maybe because then otherwise Nemo would have died. Or, oh, it's better for you to be hands off because, oh, look, this turtle and his dad seem really, really happy and they're great, you know, have a great relationship, and he's growing as a little tiny turtle / human analogous figure. So then how... So you just kind of randomly, I mean, I know it's not random, but when you say move, that insinuates that you want to have some kind of advancement. So it's not just flip-flopping back and forth between the answers. The character is growing closer to their final opinion, because I know in the climax, you want to have both of these answers to the theme duking it out in some way. So they have to be creeping closer to being able to actually answer the theme in the correct way. So how do you figure out how to balance going back and forth between two answers while also moving the character closer to the theme?
So that was where I was talking about earlier, where I was like, that the question is for the reader,
yeah,
but it doesn't really help the writer.
Mm-hmm.
So what I recommend that people do is turn it into two mutually exclusive answers.
Yeah.
So the answer for Finding Nemo's Marlin story arc is, it is 100% better to be an overprotective parent, period. Full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then it is 100% better to allow your kids to grow and take risks.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop. And then to make sure that your scenes are doing what they're supposed to be doing, you're actually deciding, does it prove one of the two correct?
Mm-hmm.
We want it to prove one, and the reason we want that, and that's called the reversal. Now, reversals is a literary term only used for the physical layer, because again, I'm the one that created physical layer and invisible layer. No one is that's my own concept. But so reversal has been around forever, but they're always talking about the physical layer. And so what it means from the literary side is, it's the reversing of the power of the story. So in one scene, the antagonist wins, but the next scene, the protagonist wins. So like the perfect storm. So we meet the captain, he's awesome, he knows everything, he's winning. But then his radio goes dead and there might be some trouble coming. So now the storm's winning, and then he fixes it and everything's gonna be good. So he's winning. And then now the something else happens and the storm's winning, and we're going back and forth, or if it's a bad guy and a good guy. I just took that term and put it down in the invisible layer, because reversals cause drama, just like what I just talked about, going back and forth between the storm and the captain, or between the serial killer and the detective. One of them is going to be winning at all times. Mm-hmm. That's where you build your drama. To me, it was logical to just take it to the next level, which is the invisible level, and go, oh, well, if I prove that you must be the wrong side of the theme, because, Finding Nemo. So one of the things we have to step back and realize is that once you have a theme, you are proving a theme. Mm-hmm. As a writer. Now you're proving it in your story. It doesn't mean it's real. So like Golding in Lord of the Flies proves that all people are born evil. He proves it in his story. Yeah. I don't buy into that. I don't think people are born evil. I think most of us are actually pretty good. There's some really crappy, horrible people out there, but most of us are good. And so he's not convincing me of that in Lord of the Flies, even though it was a good book and I loved reading it. So in Finding Nemo, whether you think it's good to be a overprotective parent or not, they're proving that it's bad to be an overprotective parent. That's what they're proving in the story. Doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. We're still going to prove this. You have to prove something. Mm-hmm. And so what you don't want to do is, you don't want the audience to know which is the right answer. Mm-hmm. Now, Finding Nemo is a kid's movie, so it's a little more obvious. Like pretty much, really even halfway through, if you even have a half decent grasp of what's going on, halfway through the second act, the adults are like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be an overprotective parent. I see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And then he kind of gets a little preachy. That's the only negative thing to it. But he's writing an 8-year-old, so I give him a pass. Mm-hmm. Like, the adults are going to get it way quicker than the target audience, which is an 8-year-old.
Right.
But let's switch over to Star Wars: A New Hope. Most people don't even know the theme of Star Wars: A New Hope. And so it blows them away when I break it down, because to me, themes are obvious. They're so easy to pick. Because A, the protagonist always starts on the wrong side of the theme. They have to start on the wrong side of the theme, because the only way to consume it without knowing it is they have to move to the right side of the theme. So Marlin starts off as a completely overprotective parent because it's the wrong side of the theme. The inciting incident happens because the character's on the wrong side of the theme. So Nemo he isn't a bad kid. He doesn't run out and touch the boat and get kidnapped. His friends are like, go touch the butt. That's what they call the boat. And he's like, no, that would be wrong. My dad wouldn't like that. He's a good kid, because that's not his theme. His theme is coming of age. It has nothing to do with being a rebellious teen. So that's a different theme. So he says no. But then Marlin shows up and says, don't you dare go out there. You'll be in so much trouble. And Nemo goes, oh, right, you're on the wrong side of the theme. So I guess I have to get kidnapped now, don't I? Okay. And then he goes and gets kidnapped, not because he gets kidnapped, not because of anything he does, but because Marlin is on the wrong side of the theme. Mm-hmm. So that shows you another aspect of it. Then throughout the entire 2 parts of Act 2, the story is batting them in the face of, you're on the wrong side of the theme, you're on the wrong side of the theme, you're on the wrong side of the theme. But like normal human beings, protagonists don't want to change. They want to stay what they are. So Marlon wants to stay up on the wrong side of the theme. He wants to be an overprotective parent all the way through. And then it'll tell you your climax because it is the final question. So one of the things I love about Finding Nemo is Marlon doesn't find Nemo. Like, he doesn't. Nemo, because if Marlon was to rescue Nemo, then that hurts the coming of age. One of the things about coming of age is that the child has to do it. You can't have parents do it. That's why most coming of age stories, they'll just be lazy and just kill the parents. They're orphans. Because then you can't have the parents get in the way to solve this. Marlon, wasn't there. He got kidnapped and was taken to the city. So that's how they did that. So Marlon can't rescue Nemo, or Nemo's theme will be destroyed. But we need Nemo back into Marlon's story for Marlon to actually do his theme and have his overcome. So the overcome happens after Nemo comes back. So Nemo's story finishes, he has his overcome, he swims up and he's like, hey, Dad, yeah, no, I rescued myself. We can go home now. You didn't do anything. You really didn't even get the trip. Your whole trip was worthless. It wasn't, because this whole trip was learning to not be an overprotective parent.
Yep.
So then the climax happens where it's Dory gets captured. She's your friend. You now have a choice. Dory's going to die. Literally nothing, no doubt about that. Your friend is going to die. You can either be an overprotective parent and take your kid home and let your friend die. It's fine. You stay on the wrong side, but she dies. Or you can believe that your son has learned some things. You can also go, well, okay, it's a little dangerous, but you're right. You probably can't get caught in that net. You're too small. And let him take the risk of going and saving your friend. Which do you choose, Marlon? It's your choice. And so then we know that that's the overcome. So when we switch to Star Wars: A New Hope, the first Star Wars movie, the theme is, should you rely on technology to save yourself, or should you rely on religion to save yourself? Faith. Now, most people are like, wait a minute, there's no faith in Star Wars: A New Hope. You're right, because they use an allegory. So an allegory is something that is one thing but means something else. The Force, and the reason why the Force only works in the first movie is because it's the only one they use it as an allegory. I wish they wouldn't have gotten away from that, because that was actually the strength of it. So it's an allegory for believing in something that you can't touch, something you can't see, something you have to have a faith in doing. And so Luke starts on the wrong side of the theme. Not only does he start on the wrong side of the theme, which he only wants technology, he doesn't even know faith exists. He's never even heard of faith. He's got, he's more farming moisture, and he's got his little speeder and all that other stuff. He's got his robots. He doesn't know faith. He doesn't learn that until later. The inciting incident happens because technology is the wrong side. And so we're going to kill your parents because technology is going to kill you if you don't pay attention to this. But he doesn't want to change. He likes his lightsaber. He likes his blasters. He has fun with Han Solo when they're fighting the stormtroopers that are after him, and he blows them up with the little, turret thing. He wants to stay on the wrong side. And so as we go through it, it's always about, dude, faith, come on, seriously, you're on the wrong side. Faith is the only thing that's going to save you. And then we know it's the theme because in the trench, when he's posed a question to answer, you get your choice. You've got a ghost of a dead guy whispering in one side of your ear going, dude, believe in faith. It's the only thing that'll save you. And we have a sister in his other ear, which he also kissed, which is a little creepy. But anyway, who's saying, dude, technology, use your computer. It's the only thing that'll save you. And now it's, all right, Luke, you have a question. What are you going to do? Choose right and you win. Choose wrong and you die. And so we know, and then, when you break it down, when you start being able to see the code, everyone's like, oh my God, that is the thing. There's no doubt about it. So that is why it is so important to have the two sides of the theme, because now we have them as answers. So in one scene with Luke Skywalker, we're going to prove that technology is the only way to go. Faith is just worthless. And in another scene, we're going to be, no, technology is worthless. Faith is the only thing that's going to save you. And we're going to bounce back and forth between those so that the reader doesn't, again, in Finding Nemo, the adults are going to get it a lot sooner because we're going to be a little heavy-handed because it's a kid's movie. But most people have no idea that this is the question that we're struggling with. And even after they see the trench scene, they still don't realize that they were struggling with faith or technology. And yet that's what it was. And again, the 70s, it's a different time. This is what's going to impact the audience of that time. We're moving away from a much more faith-based society to a much more technology. That's scary. Societal changes scare the population. And so writers want to kind of feed into that and so on and so forth, which is why some things don't hold up. Some stories don't hold up because, again, we do lose themes from time to time. But, you know, once you start realizing this, then you start seeing the power of understanding structure and understanding how to take advantage of structure and impacting the audience and making stories that people actually want to read and continue reading you. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, and again, I've had some health issues, so I haven't had anything come out in about 6 years other than the creative writing books. But when I was, you know, out there with fiction, I've got a bunch of stuff coming out this year and next year. I'm sorry, next year and the year after. I don't have anything coming out this year. But it's the reason why I have a 94% hook rate. 94% of everybody who's ever read anything of mine will read everything that I ever put out for the rest of my life. The average is, the high end average is 70 to 75%. So why do I run a 94%? Because I give the readers everything they need to really enjoy. And it's subjective. So there are people out there that think I would probably make more money picking up cans for a living. And that's fine. It's subjective. But more than 9 out of 10 people who read me want to keep reading me. And the reason for that is because I understand how to really punch them in the soul and make them care about what they're doing and actually make them feel something when they come out of that story. And that's why I push that invisible layer so hard. That's why, you know, I wrote dynamic story creation, was because that's how much I believe in this. You know, it is what my job is. And so learning that is just going to make you a better writer. And it's going to make you a more successful writer. Because the hardest thing in the world to do is sell a book. And the hardest thing to do after that is sell a second book. And the hardest thing to do after that is sell your 700th book. And the hardest thing to do after that is sell your 10,000th book. Eventually it does get easy. Like, it's so funny when you look at the industry, you got the multi-million copy sellers, which everybody knows their names. And then it's almost like an oasis of or not oasis, but a desert down to my level. I'm a B-level author. So I sell a couple 100,000 copies, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 copies. And eventually I'm hoping that I snow, because there's going from B level to A level is a lot of luck. It really is. Something happens and people start talking about it and social media catches fire and it goes viral. And that's really the only way. There's nothing you can do to force yourself from going to a B level author to an A level author. But then there's also not as bad of a desert, but there's still a pretty big desert from B level authors down to selling under 5,000 copies. Like, most people don't sell 25,000 copies or 50,000 copies. Usually, you know, there are, but I'm saying usually by the time you get there, you'll get up to that B level fairly easily, you know, just from the natural way that the industry works. But then you plateau as a B level until something magical happens. And, you know, like Brandon Sanderson, the #1 selling fantasy author today, he was a B level author until Jordan died and he got pinged to finish the most successful fantasy series that exists. And so he got his name on it, and that's the magic. And now he's the most fantasy selling author that exists because he had something beyond his control. Now, he did control some things. He's a fantastic author. He's, you know, well respected, blah, blah, blah. There's absolutely no reason that there's no reason that he didn't deserve what he got. But still, that's what made him the household name that he is, because of something he had no control over.
Going back to the question about themes, so just to wrap up the whole 2 answers to the question and coming up with scenes that answer both answers to the question or pose them to the reader. So if you come up with a theme that you want to write a story about and you come up with a theme before you actually write, a way that you can plot is just by brainstorming scenes that answer both sides of the question, right? And then if you come up with your theme after you've already drafted the story, the revision strategy could be seeing which scenes actually push the theme forward and then cutting the ones that don't actually fit the theme and then rewriting.
Or figuring out how to rewrite them a little bit to get the theme in there. So maybe you like the scene and it actually does work, but it just doesn't hit your major theme. It doesn't prove either side correct. Then yeah, just can you tweak it? Can you rewrite it? Can you adjust something that allows you to keep this beautiful scene that you've written, but also thread that major theme through it so that it actually does move the story? Right. And the reason why it's so important, especially to me, is all my stories are like a Jenga tower on their last move. You remove any of my scenes, the entire story falls apart. Every scene has to be there or it just doesn't work. And here's how crazy structure is and theme is. So Pulp Fiction, now Tarantino, I think, is a brilliant writer, but Pulp Fiction, it's older, but you know, if you've seen it, it's not written in order. or it's not shown in order. So you actually, one of the first scenes is one of the end scenes, and so on and so forth. You know, it's just chopped up chronologically. It's not in any order, but it's a brilliant story.
Mm-hmm.
One time I went through and I spent a couple of days and I chopped up every single scene, and then I put it all in chronological order. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's in chronological order, and it doesn't work because it was just my proof that the physical layer doesn't actually mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Only the invisible layer. Because once I chopped it up and put the physical layer in order, what I did was I chopped up the invisible layer and put it out of order.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that Pulp Fiction is just this beautiful example of the physical layer literally doesn't even have to be in order. None of it has to be in order. As long as your invisible layer, your structure below it, is in the correct order that it's supposed to be, then the audience gets what they're supposed to get when they're supposed to get it. Mm-hmm. The order of the physical scene doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
That's why I keep saying the physical layer just doesn't matter. It does. You have to have cool characters. You have to have a cool world. You have to have a cool overcome. You have to have all this cool stuff. But that's secondary to the invisible layer. Because without the invisible layer, you have nothing.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's why I keep saying that the invisible layer is so important. But that was a beautiful test. That really, because again, I'm a why guy. So when I was thinking about that, I was like, is it really that important? And that's why I spent almost a week chopping that, you know, that movie up and putting it out of order just to see, because that was my way of going, let's see. Because it seems like if I put this in chronological order, it's still going to work out, right? It's all in chronological order. Nope. It was the dumbest movie. I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't care about the story. None of it mattered. It was a worthless, ruined story. Mm-hmm. And if that isn't proof enough for you, then I don't know what is. Because that was when I went, yep, I'm a believer. That's me. I know it. I got it. Mm-hmm. Because it was so magical to basically have that proof of my theories.
Yeah, this would be a wonderful segue into talking about the physical layer, but I have one more question about theme before we move on. And this is really mostly for me because this is something I've been struggling with ever since I read Dynamic Story Creation, and I just couldn't quite wrap my brain around it. And it's minor themes. And I couldn't figure out if minor themes are also supposed to be a question, because the impression I got from reading the book was that they don't really have to be, you just sprinkle them in, but I didn't really know or understand how I was supposed to examine them in a story if they don't have any opposing answers to the question. Like, I don't really know how to take the theme of grief and to explore that. Like, I don't know if you have more specificity or just a strategy for going and employing them.
So taking a step back, first of all, there's not two lists of themes. There's only one list of themes.
Yeah.
It's how you use them is what we're talking about here. So
right.
You have the major theme, which is the thing that's driving the story.
Mm-hmm.
Minor themes are other human elements that complement the major theme. Mm-hmm. So going back to Finding Nemo. So the major theme of, and if you have multiple major themes, because they have two major themes in there, they have to complement each other. So the theme of what type of parent to be is based in fear. There's no greater fear than realizing that if you screw up as a parent, you're going to ruin a human being. Mm-hmm. And so that's terrifying. There's also, you know, the coming of age and being on your own for the very first time is terrifying. Mm-hmm. And so both of those major themes are grounded in fear. Mm-hmm. So, like, why didn't we have a romance between Dory and Marlin? I mean, Marlin's a widower and Dory is single. Why didn't we do a romance between them? Because romance is not grounded in fear. Mm-hmm. So we can't have that as one of our themes that we're gonna explore. So so minor themes, they come and go whenever. They can be on only one scene. They could be across several scenes. They really could. You could start a minor theme at the beginning and work it all the way through. I've never done that, but you could go through parallel to your major theme. What you don't want to do is overshadow the major theme, or it is your major theme, and your other one is actually a minor theme. But they're just things that you're going to put in scenes that complement the theme that you're doing. So, like, as an example, the opening chapter of the Genesis book, it's a lion dude in a cage. He's a slave. He's a gladiator. He's just being used for other people's amusement, and he's going to die eventually, and he's going to die for the pleasure of others. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those minor themes are played in that. Slavery is played in that chapter. Depression is played in that chapter. Self-worth is played in that chapter. But his theme, his major theme through his entire story arc is it worth it to sacrifice yourself to fit in with others?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the major theme doesn't come into play hugely, and it's not noticeable. It's still there because he's still accepting the fact that he's going to be a gladiator because it's the only way, because he's the only lion dude that exists that he knows of. Now, he meets his race later on, but they're not in this part of the civilized world. And so, and he's never seen, he was kidnapped when he was 2 years of age or 2 weeks of age. He's never even seen a female of his kind. The only male he's seen is himself.
Mm-hmm.
So even though the minor themes are way more pertinent in that opening scene, it is still, he's accepting his lot in life. He's still going to be the best gladiator he can because it gives him acceptance to this world that he lives in.
Right.
Even though it's a really crappy acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very undertoned. You know, it's not like anybody's going to walk out of that opening chapter. If all you read is that opening chapter going, oh, this is obviously a story about, you know, being accepted by the society that you're in, obviously. No, it's not. It's not obvious at all. You might think, oh, well, this is going to be a story about, you know, getting over slave mentality or believing in yourself or getting over self-doubt and depression, or because those are the minor themes in that scene, and they are more prevalent in that scene, but they die off. They're you know, things change in his life, and then the major theme, because we do want the major theme to grow in intensity. So we don't want to just go, this is a story about fitting in with society. We're going to do that. It's, you know, when you look at Finding Nemo, when you look at Star Wars, when you look at whatever, the Matrix, the theme is, it's your classic Jesus Christ story. Neo, you are Jesus Christ. You are going to be the only human being that is so special, you're going to save all of humanity. You don't get that out of the beginning of that the first couple of scenes. At all. But that is the theme. And that is what he has to accept. That is what he has to buy into. And at the end, it's the only thing that saves him when he realizes, oh, wow, I'm Jesus Christ. And yes, you just killed me, but that doesn't matter to me because I can resurrect myself because I'm Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so he does that. And, you know, everybody gets that. Everybody gets it. That's why it's a human thematic element, because we all get that savior, that one person who's actually going to forgive our sins and take us to a better world.
So are minor themes things that you start, or are they things that you just start with when you're plotting? You'll say like, okay, in this first scene, you have a lion in a cage and he's a gladiator. And is that something when you were plotting that scene, you were like, oh, I'm going to take, you know, he's depressed, so I'll take some depression and throw it in there, and I'll take some self-worth and throw it in there, and just kind of put it down while you were plotting? Or are they just things that happen naturally as you're writing? Because, you know, if he's in a cage, naturally, he's going to feel more depressed and he's going to feel this way. So was it a conscious decision putting in the minor themes, or do they just happen and then you realize that you have done it afterwards?
Both.
Okay.
If you want, I will actually share my screen.
Oh yeah.
And we can actually go through one of my chapters. We'll go through that chapter.
Oh, that would be awesome.
If you want to watch part 2 of this video and see Drake share his screen and break down how he constructs and outlines every single one of his chapters, make sure to hit the notification bell and subscribe to my channel because I will be uploading the video next week. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it and also comment down below what is the major theme of the book that you're working on right now. Make sure to also go check out Dynamic Story Creation, Drake's book, which I've linked in the description of this video, as well as his other books on craft. And I hope you all have a fantastic week and found this video helpful. As always, happy writing.